Alright, guys, welcome back. So, obviously, this is covering more of the theme of what is a woman, but more in the grandmother hypothesis. And this time, I'm covering this Scishow video, which I thought was interesting. Originally, I wanted to cover, like, woman hunters, but I didn't get around to that, and I lost the original article that I had it, and there was a lot of time between actually making this video uh, compared to the other two. So, anyways, let's jump into this.
We've all heard of menopause, the time when adult females will go through a bunch of hormonal changes that result in them no longer being able to become pregnant. And we know that
basically, the gist of this video, if you just want too long didn't read, is that even though the estrogen that keeps women living longer, they should have shorter lifespans. But in actuality, women, evolutionarily speaking, are living longer due to uh, grandmothers living longer, I guess, because men generally die faster, whether in war or. I guess I've heard that they're just like their immune system is better. Anyways, while at the same time, evolution still can't explain this because their biological components as they age are being taken away that should actually weaken them. But so it's like this contradictory evolutionary moment.
many people live for decades after they go through menopause. But for a long time, researchers have wondered why that is. If the whole goal of any organism is to pass along its genes, why live so long after you can no longer reproduce? One of the hypotheses those researchers came up with is called the grandmother hypothesis, which says that the reason that human females live so long is to fill the social role of a grandmother, caring for.
So we obviously don't see this anymore because like nursing homes exist and the family structure, for better or worse. I'm not saying that morals weren't conceived once people could individually think for themselves a little bit outside of the family structure, that for the most part was a fundamentalist framework where you kind of had no say, even though I think humans do need to be they need roles in some way, not necessarily gender. It's just I feel like we're more community based. We're not really meant to be lone wolves. Anyways.
Her grandchildren when she's not able to have any more children of her own. There's just one tiny problem with this hypothesis. It turns out that humans aren't the only species that experiences menopause. Not even close.
Oh yes, as you will see, like other mammals, like whales, they do the menopause as they age, and this kind of still encompasses larger family units. Um,
The idea that grandmothers can help improve the survival rates of their grandchildren has been around since the 1980s. Grandmothers can take on some of the burden of acquiring food for nursing mothers or dependent children, or provide care for those.
so there is a wholesome like sort of component to mothers, grandmothers, and for better or worse, again, like the larger family unit, they were more useful, but in the modern day economy, they're sort of obsolete, and the elderly are actually being more considered a economic burden. And I bet you this is in the form of more women living longer. Ironically enough, you can see how that sexism might arise.
Children while mothers are out foraging. They can also help teach children the complexities of culture and be repositories of generational knowledge. This version of the grandmother hypothesis was developed after anthropological fieldwork with the Hadza people of northern Tanzania. In this hunter-gatherer group, postmenopausal women spent more time collecting food than women of reproductive age did, which makes sense. If you don't have kids to take care of, you have more time on your hands.
Yes, women have always worked, as you will see. Um, it's pretty much a stereotype that women stayed at home and men did everything. Like everything, like to what sense? Like it's usually considered like cool what the male does, more like an honor, whereas it doesn't seem like the woman is doing anything, just staying at home. But in reality, all the cleaning needs to be done. There's still work that needs to be done. Like, imagine if she didn't do anything and the house was just falling apart while he was coming home. Like, he'd be stepping on shit, probably fall over because he's too tired to clean up. you know, all these things are really necessary. It's just nobody has time to really take care of their home, it seems, because they're constantly working.
And grandmothers also gathered more tubers in addition to the berries that everybody would gather. Those tubers were harder to harvest, so the researchers hypothesized
A
that
little
older
off
women
topic for
without
me,
children
sorry.
to take care of could devote more energy to that task than younger women could. And that meant there'd be more food for these women's grandchildren, so it would help them survive. In other words, this grandmother hypothesis suggests that being a grandmother and helping to take care of your adult offspring and their offspring is a better way of ensuring your genes get passed on than continuing to reproduce yourself. Hence, menopause. But why are we just talking about grandmothers? What about my papa? Human males can retain their fertility for their whole lives, which would suggest that whatever evolutionary pressures led to grandmothers.
Yes, and here's where the contradiction comes in, obviously, because men still sort of retain more of themselves than the. Well, I mean, they still lose testosterone, so that's not necessarily true, but um, I feel like we put more onto women and judge them more in terms of their bodies overall, though. So men can sort of just do what they do, and no one will really judge them as much, looks wise.
Didn't apply to grandfathering. One potential explanation for this is paternal uncertainty. Since the only way to be 100% sure that an offspring is yours is to give birth to it, that means the males of a species might not know for sure how many offspring they actually have, which means that it's in their best interest, evolutionarily speaking, to keep being able to have more offspring. Now, importantly, the data that led to the formation of the grandmother hypothesis was collected in 1989, and a lot of the research trying to support or disprove the hypothesis has also been done in modern humans. The evidence for grandmothers actually improving reproductive outcomes in modern human societies is mixed, but that's not a big deal, right? After all, the evolutionary pressures acting on
It's mixed depending on the economic structure that allows the elderly to flourish, maybe, and their value to the children. Like, for the most part, if you have a large community, it's gonna involve like grandmothers and grandparents, etc., like that, taking care of the children. Like, it wouldn't really make sense that there wouldn't be, because the youth tend to go out and explore other things while the support group, the older people, are sort of like, you know, they're pretty much stuck in their ways.
humans now are way different than they would have been when menopause and grandmothering first developed. So researchers were able to sort of hand wave away all the fuzziness of those results, at least for a while. And while researchers have noted that there were a few exceptions to the grandmother hypothesis, they tended to be ones that prove the rule. Take killer whales. Killer whales can live more than 20 years after they're no longer able to reproduce, and also just so happen to live in matrilineal pods, with daughters and granddaughters staying in the same pod they were born in. That means that these grandmothers are using their decades of knowledge to benefit their whole extended family tree, since their grandchildren live right alongside them. These wise grandmas know the best places to scope out food, how to avoid predators, and might even know some fun games to play, like smashing boat rudders. Check out our video on the orca uprising.
I really do think that the orcas deserve to do this to the boats. I know it sounds petty and sort of like tree huggy and honestly ridiculous. Like, I wouldn't be saying this if I had a boat, obviously, but I mean, humans are generally land creatures, even though they've conquered every source of the planet, or sorry, every surface of the planet, including water and even off the planet, etc. So I guess it doesn't really matter that we're land creatures, but yeah, seriously, I don't see anything wrong with the uprising.
For more on that story. But for killer whales and humans alike, grandmothering is described as the key to survival and sets us apart from other species who don't have these matrilineal practices and are fertile their whole lives. There's just one problem. It turns out there are more animals besides just killer whales whose females stop being fertile in their old age. Like, a lot more. Oops. Now, it's true that other mammals don't experience menopause in the way humans do, because menopause for us specifically refers to when menstruation ends, and most other species don't menstruate in the first place. But those other animals do undergo reproductive senescence.
Okay, yes, it's still a stage in their age process, so it still does apply. And she's going over that right now, actually. So, I guess technically it's the grandmother hypothesis has different versions, actually. That's cool.
Or a decline in fertility with age.
Brayden has amazed me.
Thank
He's
you.
so strong.
Other animals do undergo reproductive senescence, or a decline in fertility with aging. And this is where things get tricky, because it's really hard to measure menopause or ovulation in species that don't visibly menstruate. So scientists have traditionally used demographic data based on what we know about a species' age-associated fertility and survival rates. But this kind of data is...
Jeez, that was quick to go over something that's actually pretty malicious in its intentions, at least in terms of hierarchy and how the caste system works. But, you know, obviously she's not going to talk about that, so obviously no harm done.
In part because there are a lot of uncertainties around species' potential lifespans in the wild. A lot of animals die far before their max possible lifespan because the natural world is dangerous and scary. So if we don't know exactly when these animals stop ovulating, and we don't necessarily know how long they can live, we can't actually say that females of most species die while still being fertile. That's why newer research is turning to the physiological signs of ovulation as a better metric for whether or not a female can still have offspring. Researchers can check if the ovaries have recently released an egg by measuring hormone concentrations in urine or by looking at the different types of cells that are in an animal's vagina. While these methods are more reliable than demographics, they can also be pretty invasive, and they work better when studying animals in captivity than animals in the wild. That said, there are ways to study physiological changes in wild animals.
Hold on, guys.
You can still get urine samples.
Alright. Gonna have to make this a part 2. I gotta go eat. Probably shouldn't have made this on such short notice. Alright. I'll be back, guys.